Okay, people. So this is a really interesting one because we have got Mark, Dr. Mark Goulston, who is an MD psychiatrist, and also producer Frank Kilpatrick. So they are here to talk about Stay Alive, which is their new documentary. Which, yeah, I mean, as I said, look, it feels like a podcast because it's just this frank conversation around suicide, suicide prevention. Something that we hear about a lot, and especially after the pandemic, suicide rates, rose, right? And we hear about, we often hear people talk about, these mental health problems, but then we don't have these conversations, which does feel kind of crazy. So, what was it about now, right, that made you feel that this was something that you needed to put out there into the world?
So, Frank, maybe you can pick it up because Frank and I have been friends for a number of years now, and we're fans of each other. And Frank is very philanthropic and is really focused on leaving the world better than he found it. And
Well,
so,
that's very kind of you, Mark. Thank you.
so he knew about my work, and he knew that I was passionate about it. So, Frank, maybe you can talk about what gave you the idea that we should do this.
Sure. So the motivation really, Kevin, relates to what you were saying a moment ago. There's certainly been an epidemic since COVID and over the last decade of mental health issues. And obviously, the most extreme of those is what we talk about in this film, um, along with related issues. And so, what we thought we could do is to connect with some real life experience from uh, presenters like Dr. Goulston here, who's a UCLA um, faculty member and well-known psychiatrist, and who specializes in suicide prevention. Uh, we thought between him and Kevin Hines, who's one of the other participants in the film, that and Riko Takahashi, that who's a singer and musician, that we could bring a message of some value to people who were in dark places. So we come up with this informal kind of presentation style of a discussion back and forth. And from the previews that we've heard, it seems to connect with people.
Yeah, I think the way you kind of, put it out there is like, bare bones. It's not trying to be all crazy with effects or anything like that. It's just this honest conversation between, these three people, which I feel that's definitely more impactful. And then giving it this amount of time as well. It's just over an hour, which is great. Because I think oftentimes when we see these things get discussed on a news show or something, it's a 5 minute block at the most, right? And I think this is something that definitely needs time to breathe. So when you were, you know, 'cause as I say, we sat down to have this free flowing conversation, but were you very conscious about you wanted to hit certain points?
Well, I think Kevin is internationally known. He was actually uh, named as a CNN hero uh, because he jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and survived, and he's made it his mission and his passion to try to prevent people from dying by suicide. And so he had quite a story to share with our viewers. And Reiko also in the Japanese pop community, in a video game community, depression and suicide is pretty high. And that is something that she's also felt. So we wanted to pull their experiences out in the documentary, and also share some of what I've learned as a suicide prevention specialist, but also having had times in my life where I was in a dark place and believed that I was saved from doing something destructive.
Yeah, I think they're important things, and I think Kevin's story is, yeah, I'd heard about it, but there's hearing about it from someone else, and then there's having him tell that story. And especially where he gets in a bit and he's in the water and he's talking, it's just like, whoa, it's just crazy.
It'd be hard to believe if you hadn't heard about it firsthand.
Yeah,
I think that's one of the elements of the Stay Alive documentary that we think is compelling, and that will help people to connect with it, is that Kevin's story is so rich, along with Dr. Goulston's path of connection, either for those who are in a dark place themselves or with family, friends, loved ones. So we tie those pieces together in the film, and appreciate your nice comments about our informal approach, because we thought that would be the best thing. The best way to tell the story is if you're talking to a friend.
Well, it feels more honest. You know what I mean? I think there's certain things that get produced, but it feels overproduced, right? Real shiny, and you just like, do these people really go through this thing? Are these just actors talking? Like, what are we watching here? So I think what you have created, it does feel like this truly honest conversation between these people, and I think that's very important. And I think the way you're all able to communicate. I think there's having these messages and there's not being able to communicate these messages. Right? You see a lot of people like wanting to be able to, be those viral stars. Like, I'm gonna say this thing, and it just doesn't. It doesn't work. They can't connect. But everyone is, the way you put these things across, the way you can, create these narratives that let everyone see what you're seeing, what you're feeling, that does come across, and that's very important with something like this. So how was it like? Did you have to do any test runs or was it a few conversations where you knew that, Roku and Kevin were gonna be right for this?
Well, Mark, you're the one who knew Kevin from a while and brought him into the film. So I think you must have sensed that there was a natural connection there between the message and his way of telling it.
Yeah, I had seen Kevin present at some event in Los Angeles where he was one of the main speakers, and he was incredibly compelling and dramatic in his story. And we just met briefly afterwards. And what was interesting is I had mentioned one of my mentors who was one of the pioneers in the study of suicide prevention. His name is Dr. Edwin Schneidman. And at least in America, he's probably one of the top 5 pioneers. And when I mentioned that to Kevin, Kevin mentioned, "Oh, I met him. And so we formed that connection. And because of that connection, we were able to follow up with each other. And then Kevin actually filmed an interview with me some months later that I'm not sure he posted, but we developed a relationship. And then when Frank and I were thinking of doing this, it was clear that we needed someone to share a story as opposed to just a professional like myself talking about, from my expertise mainly, about people who become suicidal. What I hope and what we hope comes across in Stay Alive, and I'll ask you, Kevin, if you experienced it, there's a different way of communicating with people where when you talk with people, it's a different conversation than when you talk at them or you even talk to them.
Yes. Yeah.
And when you talk with people, people lean in towards you because sadly and even tragically, when you ask a lot of people in the world, how often do you feel someone actually talks with you? The majority of people will say it never happens. People either talk at me or they talk to me, but talking with me doesn't happen. So I think one of the things that we hoped we exhibited and demonstrated was Kevin and Reiko and I were talking with each other. And I guess just like beauty is in the eye of the beholder, I think we hope talking with each other was in the eye and the ear of the viewer.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel it was it seems like a very empathic conversation, right? I think everyone was feeling and understanding what was getting said. And I think the thing you just mentioned, right? Like, it was important to have someone that had kind of a lived experience of this, which
Indeed.
I think that's really important. But it also then it helps to validate the important things you were saying, Mark, around prevention, right? Because, you know, if it was just yourself talking, that is important, right? You make good points and some interesting points, the way you kind of structure and kind of, you know, bring your experience to life. But then when you have people that have experienced that depth, right, those dark moments, who then can be like, yes, that's how I felt, or yeah, I was just thinking if someone could say that to me, you know, and in hindsight, I get that. And so it lets people see that the points you are making are actual real constructive points, because a lot of times with these things, just anything, right? When you look at the books, there's so many self-help books, right? And people, and the one thing I always love is when you get these life coaches that are maybe 20 or something, and you're like, I mean, it's all well and good, but have you lived enough to be able to tell people how to do this thing? You know what I mean? And sometimes people have gone through a thing, but there's a level of experience sometimes which you need to see for things to resonate with you. And so, you know, with this conversation, all of that just comes together in that really perfect way that I feel a lot of people find very valuable. You know what I mean?
You know, and another thing about that format that we thought about as we designed the film is that we wanted to make it accessible to people who weren't in the space of being thinking about ending a life or that kind of thing, but people who were suffering from some depression, uh,
Mm.
people who knew others who could benefit from a dialogue with themselves or a dialogue with others, which Mark presents so artfully in the film about demonstrating why it's valuable that you're here. And so that broader purpose is really what we've been hearing is also very useful because, as I was saying before, we're in a mental health crisis. And for a variety of reasons that we probably don't have time to go into today, but obviously with the COVID pandemic and maybe the impact of social media, some would say so, um, just sociological, cultural changes, it's tougher out there than it was 5, 10 years ago. So all of which is to say that a film like this has something for people in a variety of situations. It's educational, it's impactful. As I say, it can be shared in terms of somebody who's in a really dark place that's a friend or a family member. So we intentionally broadened it through this kind of informal format, and we hope that we've succeeded, and a couple of people have told us that we have.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it works. It definitely does work. I mean, with because it's one of those things that, yeah, you definitely can watch it and you get this depth of insight from that, but I think you could also just listen to it. So will you also be putting it out as like an audio track as well, or is it just a visual conversation?
What we've done so far is we've sliced it into some chapters so that if you don't have time, and we're in a busy world these days, if you don't have time to take in the whole hour and a quarter, you can take in a piece of it that's perhaps directly applicable to an issue that you're thinking about. We also created a music video that of the same name that is reminiscent of the flavor of it, which Rico produced, that does a good job of, again, kind of tying the message together.
Yeah, I would emphasize, I hope people will have a chance, and maybe you can add that to our conversation, the music video, because maybe I'm just so moved by it and attached to it and reminded of Reiko and sitting down with Kevin. But every time I watch it, it just hits me emotionally right in the heart. I become emotional, and but I feel better. I feel some relief. I feel that I can see people listening to it and feeling less alone. And by the end of the music video, it's hopeful.
But isn't that really the theme of so much of your work, Mark? The dialogue you have and the foundation that talks about the reason for being here. It's about being left less alone, not left alone. And I think that's one of the things that viewers will appreciate very much about the film is that dialogue and your seven, is it seven? Pieces of affirmation that you put together.
Well, I think the way to listen to it, it's a pretty heavy experience, and I could see people not being able to watch it all in one sitting, which is why we broke it up into these 7 sections so people can see smaller parts. But as Frank was saying, I think we're hoping that people will see themselves in it. That if you're someone struggling with depression, you might be able to share either the entire documentary or parts of it with your family and say, this is what I've been trying to tell you. Or if you're a parent of someone and you're worried about them being in a dark place and they're not speaking to you, our hope is that as a parent, you could share this with your loved one who you're worried about and say, is this what you're trying to tell us? So we hope it'll serve as a catalyst for people to have conversations, healing conversations, but also if people feel benefit from it, it means that they should consider going and seeing a therapist, because feeling understood, being talked to, being talked with, if they can feel the beneficial experiences, we hope that people will reach out for help, because the statistics are that there's a high percentage of people who are feeling depressed and they just don't reach out for help.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I think also the way you've structured it, having it in these 7 parts. So that's very good, because it's like you might watch the whole thing, right? You might watch the whole thing through, and
you might watch it several times. That's what we've heard as well.
Well, you'll watch it several times, but there might be some days where you just need to hear one part of it, right? So then you can go, hey, I think I need part 5, right? And you can go and listen to that part, right? You don't need the other bits, but you just need part 5, right? And I think that's the great thing about it as well, that you'll be able to do those sort of things, because sometimes there's just certain words that you might need to hear, right? Is one of my friends, Jessica Graham. She's a great actress, and a lot of times she uses her social media to put out like these kind of messages of hope, right? And sometimes it's just little things, a few words And you know, there's definitely certain days, and you just hear those words, and you're like, yeah, that I actually needed that today. You know, but you don't know you need it until you hear it sometimes. You know.
Yeah, Kevin, I'm curious. Frank and I are very delighted and appreciative that we're doing this, and you've invited us. How did you discover the video? How did you come upon it? In what context?
So I you know, for the podcast, right? So I work with a lot of different publicists and PR agencies, and there's a lady called AJ Firm, and she always puts me in touch with people that she feels will have great conversation, you know. And she every time she sends me something, I know I need to look at it, but she never sends me done. You know what I mean? She always sends me these impactful, really, you know, powerful films or documentaries and things like that. So she passed that along, and it's like, you know, I think you will. I think, yeah, you want to take a look at this. So I did, and yeah, you know what I mean. As she always is, she was very right, right?
Good
So
to have a dependable conduit, isn't it?
mm, yeah, I think it's you need to have people around you who can sometimes put you in touch with like things like this, right? So it's you know, because I think there's so much knowledge in the world, and we don't, you know, there's no way you can have it all. So you know, there's certain people, there's certain podcasts, there's things that can give you that information. And if you don't know it, it's good to have people around you that do know it and can be like, hey, you should check this out. This is important.
Trusted sources, they're called, I guess.
Mm.
You know, Kevin, I'm going to have to jump off here, but I'm going to leave you in the very capable hands of Dr. Mark Goulston. And I thank you so much for having us on. I hope that your viewers will have a chance to preview Stay Alive at stayalivevideo.org or on Amazon now that we're available there, Amazon Prime Video. So thank you so much for letting us spread the word.
No problem.
Mark, my wonderful partner,
Yeah,
confidant in this mission, and it's been great working with both of you.
I appreciate your time. And Frank, let everyone know where they can find you before you go.
Sure can. Again, we're at stayalivevideo.org, and we have a email connection on there if people want to talk about additional groups that would like to see the film. We can certainly accommodate that. Schools and classes and counseling centers, those type of things. In fact, just as recently as today, I don't even think you know this, Mark, but we're talking to a military group of veterans who certainly are a segment that needs this kind of support and have their own emotional challenges in many cases after having served. So spread the word, talk to us about it, and I hope you'll include the URL, Kevin, so that people can find us in your comments.
Oh, yeah, all the links will be in the episode, Frank.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time, Frank. I really appreciate it.
See you both again soon.
See you, Frank. Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, I have some time, Kevin, if we want to continue the conversation.
Yeah, let's do that, Mark. Thank you. Mark, one thing I'm always very curious about, right? Because like stuff like Stay Alive is really important. But do you sometimes feel that it might be coming at the wrong time? Now, the wrong time isn't the thing, but what I mean is, it's like it baffles me sometimes why we don't have these conversations earlier on. You know, like Frank said about the military, right? And I've worked with groups in the past where, you know, they help veterans. They help veterans once you've left the military. You know, there's this support system. But but you kind of feel, shouldn't there be something when someone starts, right? So because you get given, you know, you get given your body armor, you get given your gun, you get given all of this to protect your physical, what about the mental? You know what I mean? It's like in schools, you're given learning, right? There's supposedly this learning to go out into the world and be able to be a productive citizen. But what about the mental? You know what I mean? And it's weird that we don't have the conversations earlier to give people that armor. So when you go out into the world, you're ready for it. Now, it's not to say that things aren't still going to hurt, but you'll have a better understanding of them and you can deal with them and cope with the situations a lot better.
I completely agree with you. And I've been given some presentations, and there's some things that I can share with your viewers or listeners who are looking for tactics, who are worried about someone they care about. And in some of the presentations I've been making with a friend of mine, he's become a friend. His 14-year-old son died by suicide 3 or 4 years ago, and he's a serial entrepreneur, and he really felt that he failed. He really felt that he didn't really know how depressed his son was. And so we've been making presentations where he'll share his story, and then I will share ways to reach someone that you're worried about. And something that I share frequently, and I'm going to share it now, if you're worried about someone in your life, a teenager or even a spouse who's lost a job or had a setback, there's something that we call the 4 prompts to open up a conversation with someone. And if you're a parent worried about a teenager, you're able to say to that teenager or young adult, all of us parents are worried about our children. We're all worried about how the pandemic is affecting you, our children. And can I run some things by you?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. But when you ask your teenager, that's the way you tee it up, because a lot of times teenagers do not want to have heart-to-heart conversations unless they initiate them.
Mm.
So you tee it up by saying to your son or daughter, "Hey, honey, a lot of us parents are worried about how you're all doing because we see the pandemic's really been stressful for people. So can I run some things by you?" You say that to your teenager. Hopefully they won't be too negative and say, "Okay, mom, okay, dad, what is it?" And here are the 4 prompts. The first one is, at its worst, how awful are you capable of feeling about your life or yourself? At its worst, how awful are you capable of feeling about your life or yourself? And if they say pretty awful, you want to dig in and get them to open up more. And you might say pretty awful or very awful. Okay, mom. Okay, dad. Very awful. They're a little bit annoyed, but they're still in the conversation. Second prompt. When you're feeling that awful, how alone do you feel? Pretty alone. And again, you dig in deeper. Pretty alone or very alone? Okay, dad. Okay, mom. Very alone. The third prompt. Take me to the last time you felt that. And they're going to look at you like, what? And you say, yeah, take me to the last time you felt that way. Was it 2:30 in the morning the other night? Because we heard you walking around in your room, actually stomping around in your room. And Kevin, something interesting happens when you get someone to describe something that they went through so vividly that you see it with your eyes, they re-feel the emotions. So when you say, take me to the last time you felt it. Okay, yeah, it was 2:30 in the morning. I couldn't get to sleep and I had a test the next day. Yeah, we heard that. That must have been really frustrating. Yeah, what happened? Well, I got up and I was stomping around and I just couldn't get back to sleep. Yeah, we heard that. Then what happened? I felt like kicking the wall or punching the wall. I was so frustrated. Then what happened? I started looking for cough medicine or something to take so I could go to sleep, and I couldn't find any of it. And then what happened? Well, then the sun rose, and I felt a little better. So you want to get them to just share whatever it was they went through. And And the fourth prompt is, I have a favor to ask you. And then by this time, hopefully you're connecting with your child and you're making eye contact as opposed to their tending to sort of blow you off. And you say, I have a favor to ask you. The next time you feel that way, or that you're even heading in that direction, I want you to do whatever it takes to get your mom or your dad or my undivided attention. Because we have tons of things on our mind, but there's nothing more important to either of us than you feeling less alone when you feel that awful. So I'll say them really quickly again because people want to write them down. 4 prompts. The first one is, at its worst, how awful are you capable of feeling about your life or yourself? The second prompt, when you feel that, how alone do you feel? The third prompt, take me to the last time you felt that. And the fourth prompt is, have a favor to ask you. Whenever you're feeling that way or heading in that direction, do whatever it takes to get your mom, your dad, or my undivided attention. So can you see how that might help open some people up, Kevin?
Oh, most definitely. There's, I think a lot of this is, is communication skills. And I think you said earlier, right? People don't always listen. You can sit down with people and have a conversation, but they're not listening, right? A lot of times people are waiting for their opportunity to make a point, or looking down at you because it's just like, you're talking nonsense. But it takes a lot of skill just to listen to what people are saying, to absorb those different opinions and points of view. And I think that's it, it's something that I feel people should get like training on from you should be taught that stuff in infant school. Because it's such an important part of life. And those 4 prompts, I think they really do key into having that conversation, and especially the whole and then what happened, right? Because I think we're definitely prone to be like, well, this person said this thing and it irritated me. And that's it. That's all I'm going to give you, right? Because you don't want to know. You don't care. You don't want to hear the other stuff. Like, why would you want to hear? But then if you're like, and then what happened? You're like, oh, well, yeah, no, I was really pissed off. Like, it was frustrating. I felt they were belittling me. And then what happened? Then you're like, oh yeah, then I was just like, and what am I meant to do to get past this, to do this thing, to go, and it opens you up to talking and expressing your emotions, which is really important.
Well, I want to share something with your viewers, and I'm going to do an experiment with you, Kevin. Okay, you ready?
Okay.
Just before the pandemic, I spoke in Moscow along with a Nobel Prize winner named Daniel Kahneman. He wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And I spoke along with him because I have 5 of my 9 books have done pretty well in Russia. And one of the things, and I can send you a link to a video clip. And one of the things I launched on the 1,000 Russian businessmen and businesswomen, and something I've been trying to teach everyone since then, is that underneath people listening to us, they're always listening for something. And if you can let go of your agenda and realize that people are listening for something, and just be curious what that might be without any agenda to sell them something, people open up to you. So here's the experiment with you, Kevin. Okay. So you're listening to me. You've been listening to Frank. But I'm guessing that your viewers trust you and have confidence in you. And I'm guessing that underneath your listening to Frank and me is you're listening for something that would be valuable for your viewers and listeners, because you want to honor their trust and confidence in you. You don't want to waste their time. You don't want to shortchange them when they give you the gift of their attention. And I'm guessing you may also be listening for a guest who might be a best-selling author, but who's awful, who's terrible. And afterwards, you have to go back to that person and say, geez, I'm sorry we couldn't use the interview, because you don't want to waste your listeners or viewers' time. So is any of that accurate, that you're listening for someone who can give your viewers and listeners immediate value that they can use in their lives?
Well, the interesting thing with that, Mark, right? I kind of feel that there's, conversation is a two-way street, right? And it's important that I ask the right things, and so when you say something like with the "and then," right? It's just like, it's so easy in these things to be like, that's a really good point, Mark. Okay, so on to the next. And it's just like, no, 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 no. We need to let these things breathe, right? So I'm kind of listening. The way I'm listening to you is to kind of be like, okay, that's, like, these are really valuable points. What else would I want to know about that? Right? And if there's things that I might know, but it's just like, okay, but not everyone will know that. So what is the thing I should be asking to open this up to people? That's kind of how I'm doing it. Because, if we walked away and this was a very flat conversation, that's partly my fault. Right? Because I think also sometimes, depending on our day, like, there's an energy we bring into things. And there's definitely been times when I've spoken with people and you can feel that they've started off a bit flat. So then you have to bring them up. You have to bring them up. So it's asking the right things to start a conversation. So sometimes it's not even talking about the film. It might be, yo, did you do this thing, or did you see this? That was crazy, right? Or, just something just to get it public, right? And then you can get into the other stuff. But it's being able to do that. So that's how I kind of approach these things.
So you're reminding me of an exercise that I offer people about how to be 100% present with another person. We hear that term, try to be present. And I'm going to share it because you actually passed with flying colors. So the exercise is called the HUVA exercise, HUVA. And if you're watching this or listening to it, what you want to do is once a day, think of a conversation which you want to be totally present and which the other person walks away very satisfied. So what the HUVA exercise is, which you've done a great job of, is select that conversation where you want to be present. And afterwards, you're going to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 on HUVA, and H stands for, from their point of view, how much did they feel heard out by you versus you interrupted them, changed the subject, and they didn't feel heard out by you. U is how much did they feel understood by you? And you demonstrate that by picking on a word that has a bit of emotion on it, like always, never, awful. And you might say more about that awful thing, or say more about that amazing thing. So how much, from their point of view, did they feel understood by you? V is how much do they feel you valued what they had to say? And you've been all over this, Kevin, with the HUV, by stressing, that's a really important point, and the people at home might want to take note of that and see how they relate to it. And then the final A is, how much did that person feel you added value to what they had to say? And you've done a wonderful job, Kevin, of I can speak for Frank and myself. We have felt heard out by you. We have felt understood by you. We have felt valued by you. And we have felt that you added value to what we had to say.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. Like it's, I don't know. I just think if you get the opportunity to have these conversations, you want to make sure you get everything out of them, right? Now, there's definitely times at the end of these things I'd be like, "Oh, I should have asked that, or oh man, I forgot this thing." But it's just, you know what I mean? Like sometimes things just get away from you, right? They just become this different animal where in your head you'd be like, okay, so we're going to talk about this film. And you end up talking about so much more. But then there's a joy in that, right? Because it's just like, oh, that became, I wasn't even expecting that to go to those places. And that's what I love about conversation. I think there's a funny thing, like me and my girlfriend sometimes we'll go for meals or just just a normal regular conversation, and then you look at the time, you go, wait, what, how is it this time, right? And a lot of times the restaurant is now closed and you look up and the staff are looking at you like, yeah, you need to go. And you look at, you start the conversation at 9, right? So you think, ah, there's plenty of time, and then it just becomes this behemoth of a thing. But you're so engaged with it that time doesn't really matter because you're just interested in the points people are making and just all of that. But it's yeah, I don't know. Conversation's interesting.
You mentioned girlfriend. So I belong to an entrepreneurial community, and the men have a lot of alpha energy, because they're entrepreneurs, and
Mm.
and many of them have many marriages, because entrepreneurs are so focused on that alpha energy. Um, they're not good at getting close to anyone emotionally. So one of the exercises that we give entrepreneurs who don't want to get divorced for the third time is, and when we share this with them, they go, "Oh my God, I'm going to get into trouble." But no, it'll actually repair things. Is reach out to your partner if you are a kind of person who has all that alpha energy and you love momentum, which doesn't really help intimacy. And you say to your partner, have I ever made you feel that you weren't worth my undivided attention and interest? That's they're going to go, what? Yeah. Have I ever made you feel that you weren't worth my time, undivided attention and interest? If you're a partner of an entrepreneur, yes, you've made them feel that way. And so this is a real opportunity to break through and have an intimate moment. So I believe in prompts. So if they look at you like, yes, the second prompt is, at my absolute worst, how awful can I make you feel when you want my attention and I won't give it to you? And they will tell you, pretty awful. It's a little bit like the 4 prompts. The third thing you say is, take me to the last time we had a conversation like that and I made you feel that way. And they'll share that with you. And then the 4th prompt in this conversation is, you look at your partner, who by this time is going to be crying with relief that you're having this conversation, and you say, look at me. And you say, you're worth my undivided attention. And and you deserve to have me relate to you instead of just tuning you out. And I'm going to fix this. And I was wrong, and I'm sorry. That is a killer conversation, Kevin.
Well, the thing that I find interesting, right? You said it with this, and you said it with the four prompts, but it's like, take me to, right? It's that. It's like, take me to the time it's been the work, all right, or the last time you felt like. And I think that's very interesting because sometimes when you're talking to people, it's like, well, how do you? And it's just like, in this moment of time, when, but when you add the context to it, I think that they're able to anchor themselves in that moment. They go, oh, right. So there was a time when this happened, and you can look like that, which I think is something that people aren't able to do.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it can really repair a relationship, because frequently what will happen is the other person will be justifying a relationship that is not satisfying to them. They'll be saying, well, Kevin's not a very good listener, or Mark's not a very good listener, but they're busy and they mean well. But really what they're doing is they're justifying to themselves that they're not feeling close to us. And they're rationalizing it.
Yeah. Well, to be honest with you, Mark, so I've definitely been in those situations, but I think the thing is that for me, it was like you're thinking, well, you're with this person, and you're meant to be caring about each other, right? So in that context, that person couldn't be doing these things deliberately, right? So it must be because of this or this or this. So it's like, in giving people a reason to act the way they are, because you don't want to think it's just because they're selfish, like they don't care, they value their time more than yours.
Well, I don't think you would mention this must be really difficult. And I don't think it's difficult if you have the intention to make a relationship better. So those 4 prompts are not that difficult. It may be difficult when the other person starts to cry, and they're crying with relief. You're not upsetting them. You're actually giving them hope, because you've taken a moment to care about how they feel. So there's a saying, where there's a way, where there's a will, there's a way. Like maybe it comes from the Bible or something, but I feel it's backwards. I think where there is a way that is doable by normal, regular people, where you don't have to be an expert, where there is a way, people will find the will to fix relationships. So part of what we're trying to do is offer a way that is doable by other people. Can I share something else that I've been working on about mental health, because it's such a problem?
Oh, for sure.
So recently, I've come up with a simple definition for mental health, because it's just so confusing and complicated. So I'll run it by you slowly and deliberately and repeat it, because it's kind of a mouthful. Mental health is the ability to modify your internal reaction to anything life throws at you, so that that you can create a response in your mind or back out into your life that is constructive and not destructive. I'll say that again. it's inevitable that life throws things at us. So mental health is the ability to modify your internal reaction when life throws anything at you, so that your response to it in your mind or in your life is constructive instead of destructive.
Mm.
And I think you can break that down with other people. So, for instance, if you want to help someone through that, if you accept the definition and someone you care about, and you can actually do this with yourself in a journal, but if someone you care about is upset, you can walk them through that definition by saying to them, "What happened to you?" And then they tell you what happened. Then the next thing you ask them is, "What did you think when that happened?" "Oh, I thought my job was over. I thought, it was all a big mess." "What'd you feel when it happened?" "I felt really scared, like I was really in big trouble." The next step is the most important one, which is their impulse. What did it make you want to do? It made me want to quit. It made me want to hide. It made me want to call in sick. And then you say, what would be a better thing to do? Take a deep breath and think about it. Well, actually, the better thing to do is enabling them to talk their way through it with you instead of acting on that impulse. And they might say, well, the better thing to do would be, not to call in sick, not to quit. And then ask the person, and why would that be a better thing to do? Or why would talking to me or writing this down in a journal be a better thing to do? Well, because it's less destructive. It's less destructive than, just blowing up and quitting, than doing something impulsive and then afterwards feeling, what the heck did I do that for? So if you could follow that, it's a way that we can talk ourselves through it. You can do that in a journal, or you can talk someone else through it. But can you see how that goes along with helping someone modify their internal reaction to something that life has thrown at them, so that the response is constructive instead of destructive?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think that's definitely, it's an important thing, and I think that a lot of times, like, people don't understand that, right? It's impulse, right? It's working around that and going, because sometimes you hear, people be like, yo, I quit my job today, man. They just said this thing and it was too much and I just quit. And people are like, yeah, good on you. And be like, is it though? You know what I mean? Because how do you pay your bills now? And then it's also, look, you shouldn't have to deal with certain things, but then also you need to be able to handle people saying things to you, be able to um calibrate yourself to be like, okay, so I'm not just going to react to these things. I'm going to think about it, and then I'm going to go, okay, this is what my approach is going to be. Once you've thought about, the consequences, the opportunities, the threats, just all of these things, be like, okay, the best thing in this situation is, right, just to be like, okay, if that's how you feel, thank you for letting me know, you know, and then going home and putting your resume out there so, you can find that next job. And then once you have that job, you can then quit, right? But you quit on your terms, and you don't mess with your finances. But it's just like understanding that, and I think that's the important thing. That's a skill that people need to be able to develop.
Yeah, here's another thing, that because in our conversation, you're triggering in me some of the tips that I give in my coaching and my speaking. So is that okay that I'm giving these tips?
Oh, I mean, as long as you're happy giving them away for free, then yeah, that's golden, man. I think these are valuable things that, as I said, look, this stuff isn't taught to us at school, right? And unless you have the right circle of friends around you, and when I say right circle, it's not saying your circle of friends are bad, right? But the right circle is people that understand the nuances of communication, right? And that will actually listen to you, because we don't always have those people around us. Like for me, I have a great friend called Cindy, and the amount of times we have stayed up late just talking about certain things, relationships, work, just life in general, and the value of those conversations is you can't put a monetary value on it, right? Because I knew that because sometimes you say to people, you'd be like, oh, how are you feeling? Be like, ah, man, it's been a bit of a rough day. They're like, okay, cool. So, yeah, this has been going, and there's that. But the people that you should hold ear, the ones that will be like, all right, well, tell me about that. Like, why is that? What's been going down? What's happening with you? And she's one person that always does that. You know what I mean? So it's just, yeah, your tips, I think, are very important for the people that don't have those people around them. So then they can understand the process and they can, ask themselves these questions. They can go through that, or they can start doing that to their friends, and by osmosis, their friends will then pick up the skills and do it back.
So here is a tip, because on my LinkedIn profile, what it says, and I'm trying to live up to it, is the world's leading C-suite conflict coach. So what that means is now what I'm doing, in addition to the mental health advocacy, because I'm retired as a psychiatrist, because I look pretty good, but I'm in my middle 70s, and
Okay.
and so I've expanded that and what I do is I coach people to deal with any conflict, because what I've discovered is the majority of people either get angry at conflicts and make it worse, or they avoid the conflict and they need to be dealing with it. So here's a tip I will share with you, because you're right. When someone shares with you something they're upset about, you can get them to talk about it. But how do you deal with it when someone's upset with you? It's not so easy when it's directed at you. So one of the tips, here's another tip, is called the FUD CRUD technique. FUD CRUD technique. And the reason it's called that is so you can remember it. And the way it looks is, again, picture you're with your partner or a business partner or your teenager or anyone else, and they get upset with you. You pause, and when you pause, they get a little nervous because you're pretty calm. And here's the FUD CRUD technique. You say to that person, "You sound frustrated, and I think you're holding back." They're going to go, "What?" It's like a martial arts move. Yeah, you sound frustrated, and I think you're holding back because I think you're upset and disappointed too. What? Yeah, I think you're not just frustrated with me. I think you're upset at me, and I think you're disappointed in me. Can you fill me in on all those? And then again, you want to draw from them, what are you frustrated about? And you don't take issue with it. Oh, I can see, I didn't mean to do that, but I can see how that frustrated you. What upset you about what I did? Blah, 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 blah. Oh, I can see how that was upsetting. But what you really want to do is draw all the frustration and upset about, because what's a more gentle conversation is to say, what are you disappointed about? Well, you've said 5 times that you would change and you haven't. You said you would remember and you didn't. and I'm disappointed in you because here we are again, stuck in the same place. And can you see how if you help the conversation go from frustration to upset to disappointment without you getting defensive or yelling back at them, well, you do A, B, and C. Can you see if you can make it through those, how the conversation would be much more calmer and more gentle and more of a dialogue than an argument?
Oh, definitely.
So to our viewers and listeners, Kevin's already checking out. He's going to try some of these within the next day or two.
Hey, definitely. There's times at work, and hey, I had a call the other day, and the person on the line from jump was just angry. And it was just like, what is happening here? And you have to be calm because they're a partner of the organization. So you can't just be like, hey, shut up. So it's just like, okay, tell me what's frustrating you. Like, what information would you have liked? What would you like us to do? How can we make this better? And you have to talk it in that fashion. So yeah, like having these things. There's also, I think, the big thing with this, right? Communication and just skills for life in general. You don't know everything, right? And you might be doing things this one way, and someone tells you something, and be like, oh, that would make that thing so much simpler. I should try that. I'll incorporate that into what I do. So I think that's another fun thing about these conversations, that you pick up new skills, right? There's it's like going to a sweet shop and be like, oh, I haven't tried that one. I want to try that one.
Well, but Kevin, can you imagine a customer service representative using the FUD crud technique? Because you could turn an angry customer into a fan of your company, because if you can get them to the point of being disappointed, what they're likely to tell you is, well, I'm not disappointed in the piece of technology. I'm really disappointed in myself, because this is not the first time that I've bought technology and it doesn't work, and I get frustrated and I get angry. And then usually there's something simple that I overlooked and I've done it again. I'm not just frustrated with you. I'm disappointed in myself because I need to use this new technology, but sometimes I get so nervous and I feel so stupid that I can't use it, that I skip a step and then it won't work, and then I get all frustrated and I've done it again. So can you see how you could talk someone all the way through it and be so calming and empathic that they could go from ranting to raving about your company?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, it's often baffling that that people in these customer service roles don't go through, like, a certain level of training on how to communicate with customers and their stakeholders. Because sometimes you can clearly see someone isn't equipped to do this role, right? Because they just don't know the nuances of conversation. And I think if everyone understood stuff like the FUD crud, right, it would make their life so much easier, because it's just like, look, you don't even want to be in that role, having to have these conversations when you can't have those conversations, because it's not just making the day longer, but it's leaving you just in a bad mood. So if you can communicate, you might not love the job, but you're not going to be leaving every day just feeling miserable.
Well, I'm just thinking, so this episode, I hope it's inspired you, but I blog a lot. So I've just created the title for a blog on how to deal with the angry customer. The FUD crud technique. Because I think when you can stay there, and there is training, all these companies, they're training in customer service, but often the person seems robotic, and it feels like it's good they're not getting angry at you, but when it feels like you're getting a robotic response and you're already upset and agitated, you can see how a number of customers would get even more frustrated. But if you had a technique to pull it out of them, and if you knew that after they spoke about what they were frustrated about, if you gave them the chance to speak about what they're upset about, they're probably upset about all kinds of things in their life. But if you give them a venue and an outlet to express their upset at you and you don't get defensive, you can see how they would calm down and then eventually talk about what they're disappointed in. Part of my resume is I've trained FBI and police hostage negotiators. So part of it is teaching them how do you get someone to talk their way down from a life or death impulse, having a conversation with you.
Yeah. I think one big thing is like, because these are really useful tips and insights, but how did you come by them, right? How did you have these moments of clarity where you're like, yo, this is the approach, right? This is the way we should be doing it. These are the conversations we should be having.
Well, here's something that really helped me. 20 years ago, I met a fellow named Bob Pratt, and he's the president of a big volunteer organization in Los Angeles. And he was the calmest person I think I've ever met. And I said, "Are you on drugs? I mean, where does this come from?" And he said, "Here's my philosophy of life." And I've made it my philosophy of life. He said, identify, stop, and protect others from evil at the earliest opportunity. But to everyone else, cut them slack because they're just flawed, just like you. And you don't run into truly, truly evil people that often in your life. And so part of his approach is assume innocence and goodwill until you can't. So his view is he assumes innocence and goodwill from everyone because he assumes that rarely do we run into evil. And then when someone's acting up, he said, I don't get angry, I get confused. So suddenly someone is yelling at me about something, and instead of getting defensive, I let them get angry. But then he says, I get confused, and I say, wow, in a non-attacking way, wow, what was that about? What did I do or fail to do that caused you, to come at me that way? Because, my intention was not to cause you any discomfort. What did I do or fail to do that caused you to act the way you're doing? Or was it just having kind of a bad day and I was in the wrong place at the wrong time? But that's my philosophy in life, is that wherever I go in life, I assume goodwill and innocence until I can't. And then when someone acts up, I get confused. I don't get angry or defensive. I don't escalate. And I think it's a wonderful way to approach life.
I definitely feel that it alleviates a lot of the stress, And one thing I'm kind of curious about sometimes, Mark, you might be able to answer this for me, right? Because I think, and I might be wrong, right? But I think there's times when people misunderstand depression, right? I think sometimes it's easy to say I'm depressed, where you might not actually be depressed. You're just sad in that moment of time. You know what I mean? And I think it's having that kind of understanding of your feelings to understand, like, no, this is just I'm sad, right? I'm disappointed. Yeah, I'm frustrated that I didn't get that job. I'm not actually depressed. You know what I mean? Because anyone's going to be, frustrated or sad they didn't get this job, right? But I think I don't know, there's been a shift in society where saying certain things, right? There's I think you get a validation from it. And I think people sometimes will say, yeah, I'm depressed. I didn't get a job, I'm depressed. Right? Rather than be like, oh, I'm sad. Yeah, I'm upset. You know, do you feel
Well,
that?
well, I think the key to it is you're right. There's a lot of words that are very emotionally laden with things. So if you were to say, for instance, I'm disappointed I didn't get the job, you know, to another person, that allows them to sort of be sympathetic and say, and I can understand that. But when you say I'm depressed, it often scares other people. Oh, they're depressed. I'm in over my head. I don't know what to say to them. And then a lot of times, if you don't know what to say to the other person and they're making you nervous when they say, I'm depressed, and you say, oh, you'll probably get over it. Oh, don't worry about it. That can then cause them to become agitated. So there's a lot of words that are, being thrown around that, uh, that, and I think we need to be a little more thoughtful about the words, because there's a saying I heard that I think is true. We have more control over what we say than how other people hear it.
Yes.
So if you use the word depressed and another person comes from a family that's filled with people who are depressed or worse, they're going to hear that a lot differently than if you say, I'm disappointed. So I think it's a good practice for us to be able to develop a richer vocabulary, because we can say certain things that are going to cause people excess worry when we didn't have the best word to say it.
Yes. And look, it's something that I don't know if this is actually true, right? But you hear it a lot. That oh gosh, what is the term nowadays? I think it's the First Nation, right? The Inuit Nation. That you hear like 100 words for snow, right? I don't know how true that is, but I think it's an interesting thing, right? If someone has 100 words for snow, but we only use only a very few number of words to express sadness or disappointment, right? You'd be like, I'm sad, I'm frustrated, I'm depressed. They're the things that people say regularly. When it's just like, and you hear these people have got 100 words for snow, right? It kind of tells you that you need more nuance in your vocabulary to be able to describe things and talk about it, rather than just clutch at these these throwaway words that people use. You think, oh, well, they'll know what I mean if I say this, and they're like, well, but will they? Will they understand? Because, as you said, right, you might say depressed, but you're not really depressed. You're just frustrated. But someone that comes from, an upbringing, a household full with depression, that's going to hit differently. So it's just like, yeah, we need more nuance when we're talking and discussing.
Well, I think we're all going to make mistakes, and I'll share something you might find interesting. Years ago, I was the chief mentor at a company called China Foundations, and it was located in Shanghai and Beijing. And their focus was helping Fortune 500 American managers work effectively with Chinese workers. So cross-cultural integration.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that we developed that was very effective, and if you're listening in, you can use this to cross cultures, generations, genders, races. It's a one size fits all. And the way it works, so here's another tip for your viewers or listeners, is if you're going to be interacting with someone from a different generation, a different culture, a different race, a different gender, what you say to them at the beginning of your interaction is to say, you know, if we continue to work with each other, we're going to have a relationship, a working relationship. And I know there are things from my generation or from my culture or my race. I know there are things that we do or fail to do that aren't intended to offend you, but they will. So if you can tell me what I should always do and what I should never do going forward, I'm going to do my best to follow what you suggest, because the last thing I would want to do is say something or fail to say something that where you have to explain to the people around you who's the jerk from America. So the last thing I would want to do is put you in an awkward position with your people to have to explain something that I did or failed to do that I didn't intend to upset people, but it upset people. So can you tell me something that I should always do and never do? So I'm a baby boomer. And when I've done this with millennials, what they'll say is, one thing you should never do as a baby boomer is don't go on and on and on about some old war story that we have no interest in. You know, don't ever say the good old days, because you're going to drive us crazy. Or don't ever say when I was your age. You'll offend all of us. So it's an interesting exercise that, you know, when you're going to be working with people, look, you're British, I'm American. I could say, Kevin, I'm not only an American, I'm a Californian. There's a lot of things that we say and do that would, you know, offend your British sensibilities. If you can tell me what I should always say and always do and never say and do, I'd be happy to write them down and do my best, you know, so that we can have a great relationship.
Yeah,
I'll ask you, Kevin, how many things have I said or done during this conversation that have offended you?
I don't have enough fingers, Mark.
Oh, there you go with that British humor of yours.
No, I think that's, and I think that's an important thing, right? And you know, when I start in new jobs or just, you know, going into new, you know, I try and have those conversations, be like, okay, so what are you expecting from me, right? What looks like success to you, right? What are the objectives you want to see in the first 6 months, 12 months? You know, it's asking certain things. You know, it's just like when you start seeing someone, right? It's being like, okay, so what are the things that are like the not acceptables, right? What things to you do you enjoy? What do you hate? Right? It's kind of trying to establish those sort of things, because when you don't know someone or you're first starting to work with people, you don't know the things that, you know, let's say are their triggers, right? And I think it's a big thing right now. It's like people would be like, "Oh, that triggered me. Oh, I can't believe you said that." I'd be like, "I don't know you, so how would I know this thing is a trigger for you?" Because that what I just said to anyone else is just a simple sentence, but because you've had this certain experience, it's been a trigger to you. But I don't know that. I wouldn't know that unless you told me that thing. So I think it's, yeah, there's so much within these interactions that we have to understand, right? You have to understand that not everyone's going to know every part of your life, right? Everything that you've been through, and the things that they say aren't an attack. So, you know what I mean? It's like you said, like looking at these situations, like everyone is a friend until they've shown they're not, right? And it's like going, the people aren't necessarily, they're not looking to offend me with what they're saying. Now, did it offend me? Yeah, it did, but that wasn't their intention. So I can just say to them after everything's all done, be like, "Hey, that no, great conversation. I really appreciate your time. Um, I just want to say, right, because of this and this, what you said at the beginning, you know what I mean, it hits in a different way. So if in future, if we can avoid that, everything would be great. You know, what I mean? Like if somebody like, I appreciate you telling me that. I didn't know. I will use different words next time. But we don't that that doesn't always seem to be the thing. It seems like they said a thing, I'm gonna go to HR, I'm gonna do this thing, like I'm gonna call that person out. And I think that's not how we should be communicating.
Yeah, one of my colleagues is a fellow named Marshall Goldsmith, and he's a pretty well-known executive coach. And he has a group called the 100 Coaches, and these are some of the top coaches in the world. So it's international, and I felt honored to be one of those in that group. But one of the things that Marshall talks about is focus on the future that nobody has messed up yet, rather than focusing on something that's already happened. So,
Mm.
so one of his favorite phrases is to say, going forward, in the event that we have a disagreement, from your point of view, going forward, what's the best way for me to be with you so the disagreement doesn't escalate into an argument? Going forward, what should I always do and what should I never do when we're having a disagreement so that we can avoid an argument and work it out? And I just love that approach because I think he's right. And by the way, if you do that with people and they tell you, you want to reinforce it by saying, this is much too important for me to get wrong. So let me see if I got what you said. What you said is that going forward, if we have a disagreement, what you want me to always do is this, and what you want me to never do is this. And if I follow that, what you said is we're not going to get into an argument. Is that right? And you're listening for them to say yes.
Mm.
And the reason why this sounds complicated by why it's so helpful is that later on, when you get into a disagreement, you can call back to it and say, do you remember we had a conversation that whenever we get into a disagreement, these are the things I think you told me that I should do, and these are the things you told me I shouldn't do, so it doesn't become an argument. I'm going to do my best to follow your recommendations and see how we get through this, and maybe you can tell me how it went for you. But can you see how that could really solve a lot of problems as opposed to having never spoken about it?
Oh, most definitely. Yeah. I think, as I said, it baffles me why these things aren't taught at a school level, right? From the beginning, we teach people French and other languages and maths and all of these things, but we don't teach people how to communicate or how to protect themselves from, I think in environmental, I feel wordplay, as it were, right? Because people are gonna say things out in the wild, and it's just like being able to understand what those things mean, what the intention is behind those things, right? Like what that means to you, how you can counter it. I think they're the valuable. That's just as valuable in life as maths, history, geography, just these things.
Well, don't you think it's that people default to their technical competence, and when you default to something that gets stronger and stronger, usually your emotional intelligence suffers. So we run into a lot of people who are technically and analytically very competent, but they don't know how to communicate with other people. And what happens is the greater that technical competence becomes, it's so much more powerful in their mind than their ability to just have a regular human conversation, that people tend to default to their strong suit. When I speak with CEOs, I say to them, if you're a chief executive, you don't do anything. You delegate everything. What do you touch with your own hands? You don't touch anything with your own hands. You click a button and someone else has to do it. So doesn't it make sense, if you're an executive, you're not on the front line. You're not doing any heavy lifting. You do everything through other people. And doesn't it make sense that you'd want to inspire and motivate other people to want to do those things you're depending on them to do? Because you don't do anything. And doesn't it make sense that you'd want to learn to avoid doing those things that demotivates them, especially your most talented person who realizes that they can work anywhere? I mean, I would think that the last thing you want to do is upset them so that your most talented person goes to your competition. And they sort of nod and smile the way you are, Kevin, and they say, yeah, that's a good idea. Doesn't mean they're going to be motivated to change.
Yeah, no. I think I always find it interesting, when you watch a film, a TV show, or whatever, and you see like a director who's working with the same writers, actors, actresses all the time, and you think, oh, they really have that bond, right? There's that level of trust that these people want to continue working together. And especially when you then see that so much of that work is award nominated. You know what I mean? And it's not just best direction, you see best writing, best actor, best actress, best supporting, best on a regular basis. And you just be like, that must be such a great situation. Because they trust each other and they can get this level of work out of each other. And I think that's the kind of thing that you want to, bring to your situation, to your workplace, to your staff. I had a conversation with one of my direct reports just the other day to be like, hey, this is what we're looking for. But it's just like, it's not just a case of, hey, this is bad, I need you to do this. It's just like, but what do you want out of this situation? You know what I mean? What are you looking for? What do you feel your strengths are? What kind of stuff would you like from me? You know what I mean? Are you getting enough face time? Right? Am I explaining things correctly? You know what I mean? Like, it was just trying to get all of these kind of things, because it's not, because the work is good, but there's just these things that weren't quite clicking. So it's trying to ascertain why, you know what I mean? And is it because you know, I haven't asked the right question, or should I be putting this in place? Like, what's the environment where I can get the best out of
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So, my friend, I think we've developed we've had a bromance here.
this has definitely been a fun conversation, and I thought that we could have a after watching the film, right? I just thought, oh, this will be an interesting conversation, but you don't know how exactly it's going to go, where exactly it's going to go, right? You know what I mean? Sometimes it's like, people just want to talk about this. It's going to go for this amount of time. Like, what's going to happen? But this has been so interesting. And I just think with the amount of tips and just the points that, the insights that you've given people, man, yeah, there's so much that people will take away from this episode. So, hey, thank you so much for coming on. And, Frank as well, right? You both really, man, you've been great. It's been awesome. Thank you.
Well, you've been terrific too, Kevin. And
Can you let people know where they can follow you? And also, Mark, look, you've written all these books. Where can people find these books? And if you've got anything new coming out, let the people know.
well, if you go to Amazon, I'm the author or co-author of 9 books, so you can find that under my name, Mark Goulston. My LinkedIn profile is a moving target, but it seems to be pretty good right now. And you can go to my website, markgoulston.com. And I have a podcast, which I don't have a team, so I don't support it on social media. It's all word of mouth, but it's in the top 0.5% globally of all podcasts.
Nice.
And I post 3 podcasts a week. As I said, I don't really have a team, but I get about 25 requests to be on the podcast every week, and they're interesting people. I've had Larry King on, Jordan Peterson, Norman Lear,
Okay.
Margaret Heffernan. She's in London. She's wonderful. Susan Cain wrote a wonderful book, Quiet, and a book, Bittersweet. So there's a whole range of people. So you can check out my podcast on My Wake Up Call, wherever you get your podcasts. And maybe I'll come back on because in the next month or two, we're going to be launching something. I have a team. We're going to be launching something where we distill the best nuggets from guests that my co-partners have had on their podcast, or me and my podcast. We're distilling the nuggets into bite-sized bits of wisdom.
That's a great idea. Because just some of those people that you mentioned, incredible people. So I can just imagine those conversations. So yeah, no, this sounds. Hey, you are definitely, it's open door, Mark. Whenever you want to come back and talk about, whatever you've got bubbling, hey, you are more than welcome, my friend.
Yeah, I'll share something with you because you'll find it humorous. I have something I call the Dead Mentors Society because I had 8 mentors. They all died. The last one was Larry King. I used to go to breakfast with him every morning for 2 years prior to COVID. And what I use with my dead mentors is whenever I mess up, I sometimes wake up one of my dead mentors and because I can be hard on myself. And so sometimes I'll be on a podcast and afterwards I'll wake up Larry, who died about a year ago. And I said, Larry, wake up. And he has this gruff Brooklyn, New York accent. He said, what'd you wake me for, Mark? I'm not even cold yet. I said, Larry, I did it again. What'd you do, Mark? I was on a podcast and I started telling stories. I got lost in the story, So what else happened? Oh, I said there are 5 things you should remember, and I could only remember 3 of them. Mark, what'd the host think? Oh, the host said, you have an open door. You can come back anytime you want. And he says, Mark, you woke me up for this? I'm not even cold yet. Can you put a sock in your mouth, Mark? Just let me rest in peace already. And then what happens is I miss these people. I think of them. I feel grateful to them. Like, how lucky was I to know you? And I miss you. And so I use my Dead Mentors Society whenever I'm about to beat up on myself. And so they walk me through all those prompts. So what happened? What'd you think? What'd you feel? What does it make you want to do? What do the hosts think? So that's another tip that you can use. Call upon people who cared about you, living or dead, and use them to talk you down off a cliff when you're about to beat up on yourself.
That's definitely it's definitely a valuable point. I've done it. Well, I should say I've learned to do it. It's not something that I used to do, but I definitely have started to utilize that in life. So yeah, again, another great point you've given to the people, Mark. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Look, we're going to continue the relationship and the conversation, and you haven't seen the last of me, but thank you for having Frank and me on. And please, if you're watching, go check out stayalivevideo.org and let's save some lives.
Yep. All the information will be in the episode notes. So people go to the website, definitely check out Stay Alive, check out the music video, and just, follow Mark and Frank, because incredible, interesting people. And you really can't go wrong with having that sort of insight in your life. So, yeah, thank you again, Mark. Really appreciate it. And I definitely look forward to the next time we have a great conversation.
Same here. You take care, Kevin. It's past your bedtime, so you go check that out. And you take care of yourself, and everybody else. Stay safe, and we'll see you all again.
Hey, you too, man. Have a great day. Thank you.